So moving on, we got some somewhat boxing talk. If you consider Jake Paul a boxer, I still don't. Recently, he defeated Tyron Woodley in a professional boxing match. If you're unfamiliar, Tyron Woodley is a former UFC fighter, also was a former UFC welterweight champion.
Go.
And not only a welterweight champion, but many people consider one of the greatest welterweight champions of all time. And he lost to Jake Paul in boxing, pretty decisively, if you saw it. There were some moments where Tyron looked good, but overall it looked like he was afraid to pull the trigger. So Jake Paul's continuing this circus act of these celebrity fights, but Mike Tyson kind of,
clout thing.
Yeah, called him out about it, saying that he's imitating the culture that he knows nothing about, the fight world. So what do you think about that, Angie?
This annoys me. As a person who grew up in the culture, in studios at a young age, running around in some pretty dangerous streets, like just really growing up in the hip hop culture and really just experiencing the music, the people, everything about that, to have some guy who has himself on a pink poster, doing the little sideways with his spiked hair and all of a sudden jumping in like he's hard, like he knows anything about that, really annoys me. And I'm really glad he got his ass handed to him in that interview. Because you can't go around pretending to be someone you're not. Be who you are. Like, you don't have to, impersonate or be anything. So I'm glad that someone kind of checked him on that. You know what I mean? Because you just... To see him where he came from, like the poster I sent you, it's literally him on a pink poster looking like in sync, and then all of a sudden he's super hard with the gold chains coming out talking shit to some OGs. Like, he needs to learn where his level of respect is. Yeah. And I think that is especially true when he called out Mike Tyson and said, well, he's old. Like he was really going to fight Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson has a serious face tattoo. He will beat you to death.
Yeah, he need to kill that kid.
I think he even brought him on his podcast and actually interviewed him about that situation. I don't know. What do you think, Mary? Do you think it's disrespectful for some young person to come in and pick everybody out? Do you think it's a clout shot?
I think so, and I think that they make a big mistake when they think that just because you're older, you can't do anything.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Mike Tyson still is, fight ready.
Yeah.
I don't think he's ever not been fight ready. Just because he has a podcast and he's stepped totally out of the ring doesn't mean he won't level you in a parking lot.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I have a huge problem with Jake Paul on a number of reasons, and one analogy that I brought up is he's talking about he wants to be a professional boxer. He takes it serious and he's in the gym doing all this stuff. But he's calling out and fighting all these retired UFC fighters who aren't strikers. So being that I'm a barber, it's like me being like, oh, yeah, I'm the best barber. I do the best fades, this and that. And then to go prove my point, I go get some, 50-year-old cosmetologist that does color and stuff like that. She could probably cut hair or something like that, but it's not a barber.
So you think he's stacking the deck?
He's definitely stacking the deck. He will not step into a ring with a boxer, and that's why Tyron Woodley lost, because he couldn't throw enough punches because he's not a boxer.
I have heard that, his standard practice when he gets in the ring is to just go at it, exert all his energy, and I really feel as a fighter, you can't do that. You got to have it continual. And maybe he just does overwhelm and wear people down. Maybe that could be a good strategy. But on a true fighter, they'll take their time. They're going to avoid him. They're going to move around. And he's, in the end, is going to get beat down by a serious contender, an equal contender. Mike Tyson is how much older than him?
But he won't challenge. I guarantee he's not going to challenge a retired boxer.
Right.
Like Bernard Hopkins is 50-something years old. He's not going to call that dude into the ring because he knows how to throw punches and he'll knock his ass out.
Yeah.
So he's kind of recently, this past weekend event, I don't know if y'all saw it, but Anderson Silva boxed Tito Ortiz, knocked him out first round phenomenally, and then also Evander Holyfield. He was a last-minute replacement, and he ended up boxing Vitor Belfort, who's a retired MMA. Well, he retired, but he's gone back into MMA now over in China, and he's clearly back on steroids, 100% back on steroids. And it was horrible to see Evander Holyfield lose the way he did. It wasn't as bad as it could have been, but still to see a legend like that, it was horrible. But anyway, the point I was going to make was after that win with Anderson Silva, people were like, hey, Jake Paul, do you want to call him out? And he was like, no, Anderson Silva is a legend. I have too much respect for him. I will never box him.
But not Mike Tyson.
But just going off what Katie said, he knows if it's someone that can actually can box. Because Silva, even though he's an MMA guy, he started with boxing.
Yeah.
He always wanted to box Roy
hands.
Jones, and exactly, he has hands. He can box. Jake Paul's always going to stack the deck in his favor, and he's going to fight guys that they'll have a name in the MMA world, like Tyron Woodley. Perfect example. Had a good name. And he was a guy that, even though he was known as a wrestler, he had knockout power. Because he was just a big jack dude. If he touched you, he's going to knock you out. But he never really had the hands like a boxer. He was just, if he touched you, he got you. But he was even known in the UFC towards the end of his career, he had trouble pulling the trigger.
Yeah.
And that happened in the Jake Paul fight. He had him hurt. And people were like, "Oh, it's rigged." Like he had him through the ropes.
Yeah.
It was like, no, that's Tyron Woodley.
Yeah,
That's 100% Tyron. Unfortunately, he'll have you hurt, and then he'll kind of let off you. He lets you go off the hook. And I think Jake Paul was aware of that. He's like, you know what? He's like, this is a former champion. He's like, I can make a name off of him. He's like, I know he had these bad tendencies. He's like, I'm gonna call him out next. And sure enough, it worked exactly how I went to plan.
And to his credit, if you are in a position to call that shot and make those decisions, I mean, why not? I'll give him credit for that, But the whole, even with the culture and the chains and all that stuff, he just needs to be himself and grab his own fans and have his people follow him.
Yeah.
100%. I would respect him a lot more if he did that, if he didn't play the act. Because he did a documentary before the boxing match. This is the house I grew up in. It was a 3-story house with 15 bedrooms. I was like, oh man, you struggled. I am so sorry, sir. Let me.
He struggled for that community.
Yeah, let me play a song for you, the world's smallest violin, man.
Let's drop him in Mountain View and Anchorage and see how he does.
Real.
Anywhere else that's not the just rich suburbs. And he's like, whoa, man, what are we doing out here?
Right. He reminds me of, what is that one rapper? It was a movie, and it had the white kid.
Malibu's Most Wanted.
Malibu's Most Wanted. He straight up reminds me of Malibu's
Honestly,
Most Wanted.
Honestly, he's just like, yeah, I'm gonna base my life off this movie.
Oh,
and I'm
Lord.
gonna